Hey, good morning, folks. Somebody who's been watching my Blaze King videos on YouTube has asked for me to post a video showing what the stove and the fuel load looks like after several hours on the very low setting. So I thought I would start out here with the load and just continuing taking clips along the way as we burn down this load. So what we have in there is a load of hardwood splits with some fallen down tree branches and just a couple of pieces of some flooring that I ended up having to throw away. It was never used. There's not a lot of that in there, but in any case, that's what I have in there right now. Now I'll open the door. You can see the door is, the glass is sort of has some buildup on there, and I'll open it so you can get a better view of what's the fuel load looks like. So that's the load. It's not completely full, but it's a decent load. And I'll just pan over to the left so you can see what's going on the glass there. As you can see, there's some buildup there, but that burns off pretty much within the first couple of hours of burning on a high setting, high to mid setting. As you can see, the air control is all the way up and my bypass is closed. So I'm going to open that up when I light the stove in just a moment. So I'm going to use some fat wood to start up the fire, get it going. I use 3 pieces usually. My bypass is open and the air control is wide open at the top. So here we go. So I use the top-down method, and I find that works best for me. You can find a lot of information on this method. YouTube has a lot of videos on it. Woodheat.org in particular talks about this quite a bit. The gentleman that runs that site, John, he has posted a lot of good videos on the top-down method, and in general using burning wood for heat. So I like to close the door at the start of the fire. Some people leave it open for a few minutes, 5 minutes. I think that works really well to get the fire going quickly, but I just prefer to just have it closed. Now today is not very cold. It's about, I don't know, about 40 degrees outside. It's going to get up to about 49. Right now it's about 9:15 a.m. in the morning, a January morning here. So yeah, we'll watch the fire as it starts up. So far so good. We have good ignition. The door is completely closed, bypass control is open, and the air control is on the high setting, meaning maximum air is going into the stove for combustion. So it's almost time to close the bypass because the needle is moving into the lighter section of this temperature gauge. So you can see we're now pretty much in the catalyst has started operating. So I'm going to go ahead and close the bypass. Bypass is now closed. So I just closed the bypass, so the fire should start to really start going now. So the request that prompted this video was to really understand how the stove operates when the air control is at its lowest position. So I'm going to start cranking it down at this point, so you guys can get a sense of what it looks like. So there you can see where the catalyst is at right now, within a couple of minutes of closing the bypass. Now let's go ahead and throttle it down, as they say. So there's half setting, and really it hasn't really affected the combustion at all, because the stove is just going. If this was later in the burn, that would definitely make a big difference, but I'm going to go ahead and crank it down all the way to the lowest position. And there we are, and now you can see what happens. Now the flames will start to dissipate because the stove is controlling the amount of air that's going in based on the setting of the air control. So think of it this way: when the air control is at a particular setting, the stove is going to modulate the damper controlling air into the stove so that you're maintaining a set level of burn, of combustion. So usually when you turn down the air control in a burn cycle, what you'll notice is that the flames will dissipate at some point and then start to come back as the stove is modulating from, okay, there's too much burn and it's too hot, to where now it's not hot enough, so it opens it up, and it just keeps modulating between those two positions. Or now I can feel heat coming off the stove already. Now, one of the things that should be apparent here is that even though the air control is at its lowest setting, notice the stove is allowing enough air to go into the stove to allow what I would call decent combustion. So this goes back to that video that I posted where I'm basically starting the stove instead of the wide open position, but I'm starting it in, say, the 3, 4 o'clock position on the air control, and still getting good ignition. Catalyst is in the top of its range, and overall a nice burn without a lot of smoke going out the chimney. And I just checked the smoke going out the chimney, and it's almost nothing. So it's a good thing. I mean, you can almost operate the stove by setting the air control wherever you're comfortable and it's good for your room and provides the right amount of heat for you. And really, you don't need to move it from that point, you know. You can just leave it like that, and the stove really works and adjusts to it. So the flames are slowly starting to subside, and try to get a shot of the catalyst, see if we can get a nice glow there. And you can see the catalyst glowing. It's fully lit and it's doing its job. There's a lot of heat in front of the stove. I don't want to melt my camera. I'm going to turn off the spotlight to give you a view of the stove without a bright light on it. So I've turned off the spotlight, and you can see the stove has a nice warm amber reddish glow. Very pleasing look to it, and the heat is, well, it's amazing. It's wood heat. In case you're wondering, the room is about 72, a little over 72 degrees Fahrenheit right now. Now it's a windy day outside, so you're hearing the wind sort of coming down the chimney. Now the flames have subsided, and let's take a look. So flames have stopped, and if you notice, the thermometer is over 1600 degrees. I would say that's about 1800 degrees. And this is while the air control is on the lowest setting. So the stove is designed to work even in a very low setting like that, and you're getting lots of heat out of it. It's very nice standing in front of it, and the room is warming up. So there you go. The thermometer to see where it's at right now. I'm standing in front of the stove right. So flames have stopped, and if you notice, the thermometer is over 1600 degrees. I would say that's about 1800 degrees. And this is while the air control is on the lowest setting. So the stove is designed to work even in a very low setting like that, and you're getting lots of heat out of it. It's very nice standing in front of it, and the room is warming up. So there you go. So at this point, the wind sounds pretty cool coming down there, doesn't it? I like that sound. Howling wind. But anyway, at this point, like I said, the stove is going to modulate the amount of air going in, and we'll start to see some secondary ignition. It's kind of a nice show with the glowing embers at this point. You're not going to see a lot of flames, but when you do see some flames, it's quite nice, because it's almost like an explosion in the stove when it happens. We'll try to capture some of that on video. Now I don't turn on the blower on this stove. I really don't feel it's necessary in my situation. A lot of people use it. Blaze King in its instructions, inform you that you should turn it on, but I never use it. And if you do turn it on, it heats the room up a lot faster. But I just like the gradual sort of radiating of the heat using conduction and convection methods, right? So so I just noticed the camera is focusing. So we're coming up on an hour since we lit the fuel load. I'm going to stop the video here and come back once we start to see some flames in the stove. Stay tuned. So here we are about 2 hours into the burn. We've been on the very lowest setting of the air control for about an hour and a half now. And the stove is still very warm. The thermometer showing is right around the 1200 degree mark. Let me check this. Actually, no, it's about 1500 degrees, right on. Take a video of this, and you can see so it's putting off lots of heat. Here's the air control on its lowest setting. And hard to see the load in there, but it's in there. And you can see so it's putting off lots of heat. Here's the air control on its lowest setting, and hard to see the load in there, but it's in there. I'll turn on the spotlight so not much to look at, mostly just the sound. So here we are 6 hours into the burn. The stove is performing very well. Temperature control, we'll take a look in a second, is still pretty high. And in terms of what you can see in the firebox, there's not a whole lot of there's not much to report other than some faint glowing coals, embers. I'll turn on the light so you can see a little bit better, but it's keeping the room around 70, just under 74 degrees. Like I said, it's a warm. It's in the 40s outside and it's raining, but stove is doing really well. Okay, so now you can see the load in there. There's still quite a bit of wood in there yet to burn. And here's the temperature gauge, if you can see that. It's just under, so it's about 1300 degrees Fahrenheit. Lots of heat. The heat is just coming off this thing like crazy. But yeah, 6 hours into it at a very low setting, which actually, this keeps the room at a level where you're not being warmed out of the room, right? If it was any higher, the room would just be too warm. But this is a good level. So we're approaching about 12 hours on the lowest setting. Temperature gauge is around 900 degrees Fahrenheit and still a lot of heat. Here's what the fuel load looks like. There's still some pieces of wood in there, and the burn is continuing. So it's been 19 hours since this load was started, and it's really time to reload now. You can see the thermometer is in the dark zone. It's about 300 degrees at this point. And the stove is still generating some heat, but if you look in here, this is what we see. Just there are ashes and some bigger pieces, but those will all burn down. So that pretty much is the video. We started out with pretty decent sized load in the stove. It wasn't full. The stove holds about 80 pounds of wood, and it does a nice job when you fill it up. But all in all, it was a good burn. We started out, ignition was fast, and the stove got up to temperature really quick, and it maintained very high level of heat, even in the very lowest setting of the air control. And this is one of the benefits of the Blaze King catalyst stoves, where you can set it and it maintains that temperature. Yesterday it was pretty much a cold, sort of damp day. Not so cold, I should say, but relatively cold. I think it got up to 50 degrees at some point, but it was damp. For most of the day, it was in the 40s and raining quite a bit, and the stove maintained the house around 74 degrees. And then with after about 12 hours, it started dropping in temperature. But overall, a nice setting. I think if folks are going to run the stove overnight, using the low setting is a good way to go. It allows you to have the hot coals in the next morning so that you can restart a fire relatively easy. So that's my video. Thanks for watching. Sorry it's very long, but I hope you liked it. Take care. Bye.